the truth.
North Korea must, once and for all, abandon its nuclear weapons program and ballistic missile ambitions. And it must accede to the wishes not only of nations across the region and the United States, but nations across the world to really abandon those ambitions and enter the family of nations. North Korea can have a better future than the militaristic path and a path of provocation and confrontation that it's on. Better for its own people, better for the region, and better for peace.
Michael O'Hanlon is Director of Foreign Policy Research at the Brookings Institute. Michael, great to see you as always. Okay, so first of all, what is the likelihood of the Vice President actually meeting with North Korean representatives on the sidelines of the Winter Olympics?
It's probably, not bad, not good. It's somewhere in the middle. But I think the question really would be, what would he say? And we just heard a very emphatic, strong statement by the vice president that you played, which is perfectly reasonable to an American ear, and it has the moral high ground. But I don't think it's a realistic basis for negotiation. North Korea is not going to give up its nuclear weapons entirely in the first instance. I think we need some kind of a more realistic strategy for an interim deal that would freeze their production of new capabilities, but recognize they don't want to give up their bombs because they saw what happened to Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi and people like that. It's very clear in their thinking they want this weapons program. They see it as a necessary deterrent. So you might be able to get them to stop making more bombs, but I don't think you're going to be able to eliminate all those bombs in the first instance, certainly not with the amount of economic pain they've suffered so far, which is relatively modest, I think.
Yeah. Pence is going to be traveling to Pyeongchang Games in South Korea later this week. He hasn't yet requested any meeting, per se, but Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has also hinted at talks in the past and recently actually said, "We'll see." That's a quote when asked whether U.S. officials might actually meet with North Korea officials. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I think Secretary Tillerson has been thinking through what's a realistic negotiating strategy. I haven't met with him, but my sense is that he's trying to stay open-minded. It doesn't necessarily represent a concession for the United States simply to have a conversation. The real question is, what kind of a deal would we be willing to consider and on what terms? And, the interim deal that I'm proposing, we shouldn't give too much to get. We shouldn't give away too much just for them to freeze their existing nuclear stockpile where it is and stop their ballistic missile testing. So it's all in the details of what do you give up to get some kind of a deal. And I think the Secretary of State has been thinking that through with a pretty open mind. I commend him for that.
Right. You have to wonder, Pyongyang beginning talks with South Korea for the first time in some 2 years. Yesterday, while touring missile defense facilities, Pence said that we're going to be ensuring whatever cooperation that exists between North and South Korea today on Olympic teams doesn't cloud the reality of a regime that must continue to be isolated by the world community. So how might that affect, I guess, talks between the United States and North Korea? How might talks between the North and the South actually help pave the way to that really happening someday?
Well, it could help, but it could also hurt. It's a challenge for the alliance because for the reasons you just got at, Julie, that some people are going to want to see this mini Olympic détente as a meaningful change in attitude by North Korea. I think most of us at Brookings and most others in the U.S. are skeptical and would see it more as a way for North Korea to try to ease up some of the pressure, the economic pressure that the world is increasingly applying. And I give President Trump credit for having largely orchestrated that tightening of sanctions, but it hasn't really bit that hard yet. I think North Korea is trying to look reasonable so the world will be less likely to turn those screws further. So we got to be careful that South Korea doesn't get too friendly towards the North based on false premises and assumptions.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, Michael O'Hanlon, thank you very much. Always great to have you.
Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 M's in my bag.